The US Census estimates that in 2023, the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area, or Metroplex, crossed the 8 million people barrier. It becomes the fourth area in the US to cross that boundary after New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. Here's the rankings of the top 10 metropolitan areas in the US in 2023. Dallas is in fourth place. Here's the list in 2000. Dallas is barely on the list, sitting at 9th. Clearly, to make such a big jump in the population rankings, Dallas needed to grow fast, and it did. It already had the fastest growth rate of any city in the top 10 from 1990 to 2000, and was again the fastest growing metro area in the top 25 from 2020 to 2023. With the greater Chicago area losing population like just about every major metro area in the north, Dallas is poised to be the third largest metro area in the US in just a couple decades. It's kind of surprising for a city in its location. Look at it. It's not on a major body of water like New York, Los Angeles, or Chicago. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't even have navigable river access like, say, St. Louis. But it doesn't matter because the city's growing insanely fast with little evidence of it slowing down. In this video, we're going to understand the economics and policies that have enabled Dallas to be America's biggest boomtown right now. It will also help us understand what's happening with the Sun Belt, the lower third of the United States experiencing rapid growth, while most of the northern metro areas are losing population. Is there anything that slow growth cities can learn from the unparalleled boomtown that is Dallas? Let's get into it after the bike bell. Let's get started by figuring out why Dallas grew up seemingly in the middle of nowhere. It turns out that in the early 1800s, it actually wasn't in the middle of nowhere, at least not completely. Farmer and trader John Neely Bryan was in the Trinity River floodplain and noticed that the paths of the Caddo people merged at a useful ford in the river, allowing for safe crossing. He planned to set up a trading post to trade with the Caddo, but returned home to Arkansas. When he got back in 1841, he found out that the Republic of Texas had forcibly removed the native people from the area, eliminating half of his customer base. He decided to set up a settlement instead. He named the city Dallas, but nobody's 100% sure who the Dallas is that he named the city for. Dallas was primarily a local farm and ranch town in its early years, but like so many western cities, its fate was tied to the railroad. The Houston and Central Texas Railroad intersected with the Texas and Pacific Railway at Dallas, making the city a major junction and a commercial hub. The city doubled its population in the 6 months after the railroads came through. The Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad connected to Dallas 8 years later in 1880. By 1890, it had annexed the city of East Dallas, making it the most populous city in Texas. The city was a manufacturing hub, but also a center in the global commodities trade, specializing in grain, cotton, and lumber. Those commodities and the railroad were the first of several booms this ultimate boomtown would experience. The city continued to grow into the 20th century, a mixture of Wild West spirit, Jim Crow segregation, and economic might. But the real inflection point came for Dallas in the 1910s and 1930s, when the city benefited from another economic boom: oil. Local settlers knew about the oil in the area. In fact, they complained that they kept getting oil when they drilled for water for their cattle. Eventually, prospectors went looking for oil using a new technology. And in 1901, the Lucas Gusher at the Spindletop oil field near Beaumont, Texas, officially kicked off the Texas oil boom. Initially, Houston benefited the most from the Gulf oil fields, but Dallas wouldn't be left out of the action for long. After rampant speculation across the state, prospectors struck oil in the Electra oil fields in the north, opening up the entire North Texas oil field. They found other oil fields in Texas later, and they found the largest oil field in Texas in 1930. It was the East Texas oil field, practically in Dallas's backyard. Now, each of these oil fields created their own little boom towns, but it was really the already established big cities like Dallas that ultimately benefited. These oil companies put their headquarters in the big cities, and Dallas today is home to many energy company headquarters, including ExxonMobil and Halliburton. Many of these companies got even richer during the second Texas oil boom of the 1970s and early 1980s. The global energy crises of the time raised the price of oil. This was bad in most places, but great in Texas. The companies benefited from high prices and got even richer. Some of the money went to Dallas's skyline, most of which were built in the 1980s. This includes Dallas's tallest building, the Bank of America Tower, completed in 1985. You can see the state of the skyline in 1978, right in the opening credits of the TV show Dallas. It wasn't much to look at just yet, but you can compare it with the credits from Dallas in its 11th season. There's a pretty significant change. Side note here, but the fact that the city got an entire TV show named after it highlights its rise in the 70s and 80s. Dallas was American prosperity during that time. Also, this theme song is irresistibly catchy. It's really hard to overstate the impact of oil on Texas. You only have to look to the more recent boom towns of the Middle East to see what oil money can do to a place. Oil is an excellent commodity, more energy dense than coal, and can be shipped around via pipe instead of train or truck. To this day, much of Dallas's success is tied to the oil and gas industry. The oil booms brought the population of the Dallas Metroplex to 3.2 million by 1990. That means it over doubled in population in the 34-year post-boom era, which is sort of nuts. And I think we can maybe refer to this era as modern Dallas and really the rise of the Sun Belt in the United States. How did the Dallas area add almost 5 million people in that time period? Well, the first thing I'll say is that there's something counterintuitive happening. The United States today is producing more oil than any other country in the world except for Saudi Arabia. Texas is producing almost 3 times the amount of oil it did in 1981. But Dallas isn't really an oil town anymore, or at least not exclusively. Technology, finance, insurance, and logistics are all bigger businesses in town these days. The Dallas area is home to Texas Instruments, makers of high-school graphing calculators everywhere, and the telecom giant AT&T. Transportation is a massive industry in the region. It's home to the world's second busiest airport by passenger volume. DFW is the largest hub airport for American Airlines, which is headquartered in the region. Southwest Airlines is also headquartered in the city, though its hub airport is Dallas Love Field. It's also a major hub for truck-based logistics, which is the most common way goods are moved across the United States. A recent report from the Dallas Federal Reserve Bank found that overall growth is buoyed by a well-educated population, a competitive cost structure, and the US economy's strength. But I think it's time to leave the economy to the side and talk about weather. To understand why Dallas continued to grow and over double its population in the post-war years, you have to look at the rise of the Sun Belt generally. It's called the Sun Belt because the area gets a lot of sun, and perhaps just as importantly, not a lot of snow. It turns out people don't love shoveling driveways. The population of the United States has shifted southward over the decades as people have taken advantage of the warmer weather, made more tolerable by the advent of widespread use of air conditioning technology. This is just one contributing factor, however, but it's not the whole picture. Housing is crucially important as well. Sunbelt cities, with the exception of those in California, have imposed fewer regulations on the construction of new housing. People can get more house for the money in the South, and they can just afford it, period. And if you're working in insurance in Chicago and live in a suburb, you could just move south and live in a larger suburban house near Dallas and enjoy better weather. It is appealing. And most of that new housing is indeed suburban housing, and that's what's led to a ton of urban sprawl. Let me illustrate that for you. This is the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in 1984. I'm going to draw a rough line around the extent of the urbanization. Now let's stop in 1994 and draw another line. And now here's 2004. That's some significant growth. And here's 2020, the last Google Earth imagery I can get. That's just some bonkers sprawl happening. You'll notice that much of the growth is happening in the northern part of the area, specifically Denton and Collin counties, which together adds up to 2 million people. When you add in Fort Worth, a city about to cross 1 million people, you have a metro area with not just one center, but several, spread out across 22,000 square kilometers, about the same size as the US state of New Hampshire. This is the downside of lower regulations and cheaper housing. Sure, lots of people get houses and yards, but everything gets really spread out. This is a problem across the Sunbelt cities. Dallas does have a couple of things going for it, though. First off, the 80s oil boom concentrated a lot of jobs in the central city, meaning it's still relevant in a metro area with many different job centers. It's also becoming denser faster than it's sprawling, if you can believe it. Between 2010 and 2020, the Metroplex became 17% more dense. That still means it's at half the density of Los Angeles, though. That is a shame because more density is helpful when building mass transit, something that could help it with its traffic issues. Now, Dallas doesn't actually have the worst traffic in the US, but traffic is getting worse fast thanks to its incredible growth. On some level, it's very strange that a metro area of 8 million people doesn't have a heavy rail metro system. It does have the nation's second largest light rail system after LA. What can other cities learn from the jewel of the Sun Belt? Dallas has succeeded due to its series of economic booms, encouraged in part by its business-friendly policies and limited regulation on new housing construction. It's selling prosperity and the American dream, and millions of people have bought in. I think it's worth it for other cities to consider the ways that they can make it easier to build housing. It doesn't have to mean allowing every suburban home developer to build homes on quarter-acre lots, but it's pretty clear that supplying more housing in Dallas has helped keep prices down, and that's something that any city can emulate. It remains to be seen if this unchecked growth will come back to haunt the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in the form of snarling traffic or job inaccessibility due to long-distance commuting, or something else entirely. But for now, the area will continue to grow and be the preeminent example of Texas urbanism. The Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex will definitely see the need for more mass transit as the region continues to grow and tax its existing road networks. Transit service planners need to understand where new routes should be located to best serve the community. Luckily, there's a really great tool for transit route and timetable design that makes it easy to sketch out new route ideas, compare scenarios, refine timetables, understand budget impacts, and anticipate ridership. It's PTV Lines. They've given me access to this tool, and I have to say that it's super impressive. Within 5 minutes, I was adding transit stops and planning routes. It instantly creates these timetables based on the schedule you can specify. It even generates key performance indicators and costs on the fly, meaning I can get instantaneous feedback on the efficiency of these routes. I really love that it's a cloud-based tool I can work with right in my browser. That also means that teams can collaborate on scenarios easily. While it's really easy to get started, there's so much customization available for advanced users like, actual transit service planners. Equity is one of the goals mass transit systems aim to meet, and PTV lines can help ensure service is provided fairly. Catchment areas ensure that transit stops are distributed to be within reach of as many riders as possible. You can ensure that transfer times between lines are long enough for everyone to make their connections, and you can adjust frequencies to make sure as many people as possible can get to their destinations on time. This is a tool I could see a seasoned professional using right alongside a new intern because everything's super clean and intuitive. Honestly, I wish that some popular city building games had tools that worked this easily. If all of this sounds great to you, sign up for a free demo of PTV Lines and get personalized consulting from one of their experts to help you set up the tool for your dedicated use case. Click on the link below or on screen to get started.